Colin, can you go through specific guidelines that must be followed with UV technology?
Yeah, so from a regulatory standpoint, looking at controls and how you use the space, there hasn't been many guidelines from a national or worldwide type of application up until recently. September of last year, so 2020, UL came out with something called UL 8802. And this is looking at UVC technology, specifically in the 200 to 700 nanometer spectrum, and is looking at it from a system approach. So it's the device creating the lighting itself, so the UVC spectrum, any controls components tied to that system, and also any third-party device that might be receiving or sending data or information to that system. The idea is looking at it as a holistic approach, how the user would actually utilize that system and all of the safety guidelines behind it. One of the big themes behind UL 8802 is double redundancy. So that's from a mechanical standpoint, an electrical standpoint, a data communication standpoint, and also there's a physical aspect too. So the idea is if any component of that system fails, whether a rat chews through a cable, the system has a power outage, the system was struck by lightning, there's very specific guidelines to how the system must respond to those fault scenarios, making sure that once someone finally enters that space at a different time, that they're not going to be accidentally exposed to some of that irradiation or any of those type of applications. Also, too, we want to look at how the system works together from a communication standpoint. In white light communications and controls, historically, we've tied in our systems to a lot of third-party devices where we share information about how that space is. Occupancy sensors have been very common for our controls applications for about 10 years, a little longer than that. And other systems have been utilizing that data for that. So HVAC, third-party intersystems for security, things like that, have been receiving data and commands from our system to try to share that information. We want to make sure now that those systems, if they're connected, that's a failure point or a point of entrance into that system. So if someone wanted to hack into the system and possibly change the settings and activate the UVC spectrum, we want to make sure that from a system component, we have security and safeguards that the system will respond the way we want it to and not open up any form of accidental irradiation or just making sure the safest space at all times. So UL 8802, it's very new. It's still evolving as time goes on. But again, the big part about it is a system approach. Everything tied to the system now has to be compliant to that standard. Also, there's a very rigorous testing protocol where they will put it through different scenarios about space being occupied and trying to activate the system being activated, and then having someone try to enter the space during the radiation, and other fault scenarios too that have to be passed before it'll be considered compliant with this regulation. So it's new, it's fairly not well known yet. So there's a lot of information coming for that. And just be aware that that's a very important consideration for the spaces where you have to be unoccupied for the radiation. So not all of them have to meet this very rigorous testing standard, but we do recommend it for any time you can, just to have that safety aspect built into it.